We're in a new series tonight, and I'm so excited to start this new series. We're talking about purpose. How many of you know that God has a purpose and a plan for your life? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But first, I want to welcome all of our prison campuses that are watching, and also anybody watching on YouTube. Thanks so much for tuning in with us. It's great to be with family tonight. Can we hear it for them real quick? Real quick hand clap. There we go. Love you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. But let's pick right up, and we're going to look in Jeremiah chapter 29 and verse 11. Jeremiah chapter 29 and verse 11. Most of you, if you've been in church for any length of time, you're familiar with this passage. It's one of my all-time favorite scriptures. If my wife liked tattoos, I would probably get a tattoo of it, maybe, but she hates tattoos, so it's never going to happen. But I love this quote by Mark Twain. Mark Twain said this. He said, the two most important days in your life are the day that you're born and the day that you find out why. How many of you know that it's vitally important that we find out why we're here? There is a purpose for your life. And I think it's so interesting that in our world today, the one thing that's lacking most in some people's lives is a sense of purpose. In fact, a lot of people look at their lives and they see no meaning, no purpose. They look at what they're doing currently and they think that it's pointless, aimless, and that their life has no meaning, that their life has no future, that there's just no worth or value to their life. But how many of you know that God places a value on your life? And how many of you know that God has a purpose for your life? I'm so thankful tonight that I know that I serve a God who has a plan and a specific purpose for me to carry out, so no days are wasted and no days are worthless, but every day is full of meaning and purpose. I'm so thankful for it. But in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, it says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, says the Lord. They're plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." I want you to underline or circle that word hope, and I want you to write next to it, if you are taking notes, or you can just jot this down in your notes, confident expectation. Confident expectation. The Bible definition for hope is actually confident expectation. See, we as a society in our culture today, we look at hope completely different from the definition that the Bible gives for hope. We look at hope like, well, I hope so. I hope this happens. Hopefully, something turns out the right way for me. Hopefully, things work out. But I'm so glad that when God says he has a plan for me, that it's not, hopefully it works out. Hopefully he has something good. Hopefully at the end of this, it's not for disaster, but it's no, I can confidently expect that God has good things, that he's got a good plan. Come on, how many of you are thankful tonight that you can have a confident expectation that God has good things for your future? I don't know about you, but man, it gets me so excited when I know that I serve a God who thought about me before I was even born, who has something for my life. In fact, in Psalm chapter 136, verse 16, if you want to flip over there really quickly, it says, "You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed." What an incredible passage of scripture. That God actually knew you before you were born, and every day of your life was written in a book. Every day of your life was written out before you even breathed your first breath. Pretty crazy. It's pretty awesome. But here's what I found. A lot of us might not be in the right book. A lot of us, if we're in the right book, we might not be in the right chapter. And if you're in the right chapter, some of you aren't on the right page. And I don't know about you, but I want to be on the right page. I want to be on the path to the purpose of God for me. I want to be right in line with his perfect will for my life. And I think you're here at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night because you want that too. You want to be in line with the path that God has for you. You don't want to be wondering, man, am I on the path or aren't I? Am I in the right book or not? And I believe that you can get alignment with his plan and his purpose. It's really simple and really easy. It's really simple and really easy to get in line with his plan. And I want to encourage you with this. The key to getting into the plan of God, the key to getting on the right path is to be led by peace. I want you to jot that down if you're taking notes. Always be led by peace. Because if you're always led by peace on the inside, you won't allow the pressures on the outside to dictate your decisions. See, too often we allow pressure from the outside to cause us to go one way or the other when God leads us by a still small voice on the inside. He leads us by peace on the inside. He leads us by a knowing on the inside that we are doing the right thing and going in the right direction. How many of you know that life can be full of pressure? If you're not careful, you'll always chase wherever the pressure pushes you. But I've found that pressure can push you out of the very place that God's called you to be planted in. You see this happen all the time with local churches. See, there's a little bit of resistance. Maybe somebody, a person, kind of their personality rubs you the wrong way. And all of a sudden, the pressure, the tension that you feel from that relationship, maybe they're a leader in church and you're a leader in church. And all of a sudden, the pressure from that friendship or the pressure from that person causes you to be pushed out of your place. See, we can never be led by pressure because pressure will always be there, but so will peace if we will just pray and seek the presence of God in our lives. I believe that peace is one of the most vital things. So 3 things I want to encourage you with really quickly tonight. That was for free, the part on peace, but 3 things I want to encourage you with tonight. The first thing is simply this, that God has a plan. I don't know about you, but man, when I first found out that God had a plan for my life, there was something exciting about that. There was something great about that when I first discovered that God actually has a plan for me. He's got something specific for me. But a lot of you might be in the boat that I was in when I first discovered this. It was exciting, but I wanted God's plan for me to match my plan for me. I had my own plans when I first discovered that God had a plan for me. I had my own pursuits. I had my own things that I wanted to do. See, I always thought when I was younger that I would go into business and I would be in business, and I just planned on being in business for a while and then owning businesses. And I thought, I'll be involved in church, right? I'll be involved, I'll give to the church. I just never want to work at a church. And that was my thought. I was like, I'll never work at a church. I even said that. I'll never go to Bible school. I'll never go to church, or never work at a church. I'll never be a pastor. Those types of things. I've learned to just never say never. It didn't just start for me as a Justin Bieber song. It started way before that. But I've learned to just never say never. But I found that God had a plan for me, and I wanted it to match up with my plan. But I found that the key to walking in God's plan is you have to surrender your plan to Him. For me, that looked like a journey that I never thought I would go on. I remember going to school for business, thinking I had a 5-year plan. How many of you in here, you got a 5-year plan? 1 of you? Okay, awesome. 2 of you, maybe 3, maybe 4. Okay, that's good, I'm glad. I had a 5-year plan. I had a planner. I was planned out, had a 5-year planner, knew exactly what I was gonna do, exactly where I was gonna be. And all of a sudden, God started dealing with my heart. I started to just feel like maybe I wasn't in the right place. I started to just not have peace on the inside. I started to just not feel right about what I was doing and where I was going. And I don't know why, but I just felt like everything on the outside with my life was going really well. I was on the dean's list in college. Everything was good. Jillian was starting to attend that school too, so we were at the same college. We had some of the same classes. And I was pumped. I was like, this is great. Everything's working out perfect. And on the outside, everything was. But on the inside, I had 0 peace. How many of you know you can't put a price on peace? That if you don't have peace, you don't know how much you value peace until you don't have peace. I didn't have any peace. And so I realized, man, I gotta get my peace back. I've gotta find peace again. And so every time I would get into the presence of God, He would start dealing with me about this foreign thought to me, which was going to Bible school. And that sounded terrible. And so I would just kind of push it down. Every single time that He'd say it, I'd just be like, nah, not gonna do that. Nope, not gonna do that. Not gonna go to Bible school. And so finally, I'll never forget, I was in a worship experience. Some of you have heard this story. I was in a worship experience. Pastor Noah Nickel was talking. I was in a college service, a lot like this. And he starts talking, and he starts teaching this message on Esther. For such a time as this, you've been called. Will you step up and take your place? I'm sitting in my seat, and I can't stop squirming because it's just speaking directly to me. And I realized in that moment, God's calling me to ministry, and I probably gotta go. So I remember just being like, lifting my hands and then not lifting my hands, just being like, nope, I'm not gonna do it. In bed that night, I'm laying there and God's still dealing with my heart. I'm like, fine, I'll do it, fine. Just I'm gonna go to sleep now, fine, I'll do it. But I remember saying like, God, I'll do it, but man, if I step out, if I do this, I don't wanna do this. If you could call anybody else to do this, please call them, because I don't wanna do this. But I'll do it, but if I do it, God, I'm believing you that you're gonna make provision for me along the way. That you're gonna go ahead and take care of the needs that I'll have. This is gonna involve me moving out of state. This is gonna involve me living on my own. This is gonna involve me getting a job where I know no one. So if you're calling me to move to Oklahoma and go to Bible school, I need you to provide the way, so I'm believing that you will. And how many of you know that the plan of God is always accompanied by the provision of God? It's not only accompanied by the peace of God, but it's always accompanied by the provision of God. And so God provided, and I could give you story after story. I'll give you one. I went down in the springtime to their get acquainted type thing where you can go visit the school and all of that stuff. And I ran into a kid that used to go here. I didn't even know him. He used to go to this church. He walks up to me like, hey, you go to Faith Family, don't you? And I'm looking like, yeah, I do. And he's like, do you remember me? I'm like, not at all. And he's like, hey, I didn't think so, but I used to sing in the choir for like 2 months. I was there for a little bit. But anyways, my roommate's moving out. And so I was wondering if you'd want to live with me, if you'd want to move in to student housing. The thing about it is he didn't know that 2 hours earlier I'd been over at the student housing units, and they told me they had a 150 person long waiting list and that there was no way that I would get in. And for the past 2 hours, I had been driving all over town looking for apartments, and none of them were apartments that I could afford on my own. And so I knew that I was either gonna have to get in student housing somehow by a miracle, or I was not gonna be able to go because I couldn't pay for the rent. Like I couldn't even pay like 2 months rent at that time. And so literally, when there was a 150 person waiting list, I moved to the top because you had to know somebody to get in. I didn't know anybody, but there was a divine thing where I met somebody, a divine connection there while I was walking just down the sidewalk into the Get Acquainted. See, if God called you to do something, he'll always make provision. Later on that day, I went to a restaurant. I had no experience working in a restaurant. If you aren't familiar with the restaurant business, they don't hire people that have no experience to serve right away. You never get a job serving. And so this particular restaurant was the busiest one in Tulsa, which Tulsa was a super big kind of area in that, there was Broken Arrow where I lived, and then Tulsa that was bigger, had more restaurants. So this was the busiest restaurant in Tulsa. So they're definitely not gonna hire a new server that's never served before, never worked at a restaurant. So for some reason, they like me, and they hire me on the spot to be a server. I have zero experience. I can't even pronounce half the things on the menu, but yet I have a job. It was amazing, literally. There was no reason naturally that I should have gotten the job, but I ended up getting the job. So God just continually provided. Before that, he had provided plane tickets for me to even go to the Get Acquainted. Somebody came up to my dad randomly and said, do you need to fly somewhere? My dad was like, my son does. He's like, well, I have frequent flyer miles. God just told me this morning to give them to you. So literally, my trip was paid for. I got an apartment and a place to live, and I got a job all in the same trip. Why? Because I believe when you're in the plan of God, it's always accompanied by the provision of God. And I can tell you time after time after time where I've seen God be faithful. As I've stepped out in obedience, there's been God there with his provision to provide for me, because God's plan, it always is accompanied by peace and his provision. I'm so thankful for the provision of God. And I want to encourage you in here, if you feel like God's called you to do something that's beyond you, God will provide the resources. God will provide everything that you need to do it, to get there. His provision will go before you. Just be led by peace and allow the provision to be in his category, and trust him with the provision. So God has a plan. It's a good plan, but sometimes it involves us surrendering our plan to his. I never wanted to go to Bible school. I could never speak in front of people. You've heard my story, a lot of you, if you've been here for any length of time. I couldn't talk in front of people. I failed every public speech that I did. The highest I ever got was a 30% on a speech. I did a bunch of extra credit in my college speech class to get it up to a B, and I got it up to a high B, was able to come in and take a test the next day to find out if I could get an A. And the teacher told me, the professor was like, don't come take the test. You can come take the test, you could technically get an A, but don't come. I'm not gonna give you an A in this class. And I was like, huh? She's like, technically, by the statistics, you could get an A, but don't come. It's like, what? Why? She was like, I can't give you an A in this class. I was like, looking at her like, okay. She's like, technically you've done the extra credit. You could get the A. I understand that. But if I give you an A in a class called public speaking, I would lose my credibility as a teacher because you are the worst public speaker I've ever heard. I thought, thank you. It's exactly what I wanted to hear. It's awesome. Thanks so much. So man, I felt like I got kicked in the stomach that day. And I walked out into the hallway and it was crazy because I felt like God ministered to my heart. He just spoke to me in that moment. Said the very thing that people say you can't do is what I'm gonna use you to do. I think that you can never go by what people say. If you allow people to dictate your purpose, they'll always point you in the wrong direction. But you have to be led by peace and know that the provision of God is there. And if he provides for you, he'll go ahead and give you. He knows your potential. He knows you as a person better than you know yourself. So it's best to just trust him, leave the opinions of people. I think one of the enemies of the plan of God is listening to the opinion of people and waiting for the approval of people. If you're constantly looking for the approval of people, listening to the opinions of people who just have a view of your life and should never have a voice, they'll always talk you out of what God says you can do. But if you'll listen to God, if you'll get in his presence, be led by his peace, he'll always lead you into your potential and into your purpose that he's ordained for you before the foundations of the world. So I'm so thankful that God declares my purpose, not people. The only person who can define you is the one who designed you. The only person who can call you is the one who created you. We have to know that God is the only one who can call us to whatever he calls us to. So the second thing is simply this, that God's plan for your life is good. I know it's really simple tonight. God has a plan for your life, and his plan for your life is good. See, part of the reason that we don't surrender right away to God's plan for our life is because we don't actually believe that his plans are as good as our plans for us. We don't actually believe that what he has for us is as good as what we have for ourselves. Think about it. When we first become followers of Jesus, a lot of times we don't want to give up the former life. We don't want to give up the things from our past. We don't want to give up some of the partying, some of the stuff that we used to do. Why? Because we think if we do that, we'll be missing out on what's fun. And we think that if we do what God called us to do, we won't be having any fun anymore. But I want to tell you tonight that doing what God's called you to do, it's the most fulfilling, most rewarding, most exhilarating thing that you could do because you never cease to be stretched beyond your capacity and you never cease to go out of your comfort zone. You are constantly out of your comfort zone and you are constantly stretched beyond your capacity so that the only thing that you can do is know that you have a dependency on his grace and that if his grace doesn't show up on the scene of your life day after day after day, there is no way that you could survive in what he called you to. There is nothing more exciting than living a grace-infused life that glorifies God. There's nothing more exciting. There's nothing more exhilarating. Some of you haven't been enjoying being a follower of Jesus, and I just want to encourage you, it's because you're not doing it right. The only way to do it is fully surrendered, and the only way to do it is fully sold out because God has a plan for your life, and his plan for your life is good. In Ephesians 2:10, it says that we're his masterpiece, that he's created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we could do the good things that he planned for us long ago, so that we could do the good things. God's plan for your life is good. And I want to encourage you with this really quickly, just a quick side note, that the path to purpose, it's paved through preparation. The path to purpose, it's paved through preparation. Never despise preparation time. Embrace preparation because the key to your opportunities tomorrow are found in your obedience today. Like if you want the opportunity of God tomorrow, obey the command of God today. If you want to see God give you the big things that you desire, be faithful with the small things that he's placed in your hand. See, there are things in your heart, each and every one of us, we have God dreams that are in our heart. But until we're faithful with what God's placed in our hand, he's never going to be able to fulfill what's in our heart. You have to be found faithful with what he's put in your hand. I believe that one of the most important things that you and I can do to fulfill the purpose and plan of God for our lives is be faithful with what is in our hand. Be committed to what God's called us to be committed to today. Be obedient in the opportunity that's in front of us right now. Even if it doesn't seem big, even if it doesn't seem significant, if it's God's, it's big. If it's God's, it is significant. And if you'll make that determination in your heart, because this is all about a heart position. God, if it's yours, it's big. That's what it looks like to humble yourself. And what does the Bible say? That if we humble ourselves, the Bible says that if we humble ourselves, that he will exalt us in due time. If we humble ourselves. It's interesting because we live in a society and a culture that says the opposite. That says you have to make yourself. That you have to make yourself into something great. That you have to look out for number one. That you have to do, in order to be something great, you have to do things your way, on your terms. And isn't it interesting that we see an example of that in the Old Testament, where people try to do their things their way without God, and they try to make a name for themselves and make themselves great? In Genesis chapter 11, they tried to build a tower called Babel, and God actually looked at it and said, like, hey, since they're speaking the same language and they're all on the same page, nothing will be impossible for them because they're united. Nothing will be impossible for them. So God had to confuse their languages. Why? Because they said, let us build a tower up to heaven and let us make ourselves great. We'll make ourselves a great nation. If you look in Genesis chapter 12, God tells Moses, hey, go to the land that I've sent you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will make your name great. See, what was the difference between Genesis 11 and Genesis 12? Genesis 11, it was man trying to do it on his own without God. In Genesis chapter 12, it was God saying to man, if you'll obey the opportunity that I'm putting in front of you, I will make your name great and I will make you a great nation. See, who gets the glory in your story? The life that you're living right now, who gets the glory for it? Because if you're trying to make yourself, you'll always end it yourself, what you're capable of, what you're able to do, what you have in and of yourself, your abilities, your strengths, your gifts. But if you allow God to use you, and you just take the simple steps of obedience, and you'll just be faithful with what's in your hand, and you'll do the last thing that God told you to do and be faithful in it, then God will make you great. And his grace will be sufficient towards you because God gives grace to the humble. The Bible says he gives more grace to the humble. So you'll have his ability on top of your ability to do what you otherwise couldn't do. And it won't be your ability that you stop at. It'll be his ability that you rest in as you continue to go further than you ever could on your own. See, there's two ways of doing things. There's man's way and there's God's way. I don't know about you, but in achieving my purpose, I want to go beyond me. I don't want to stop with what I'm good at. I want to know that I'm dependent on God every second of every day to do what he's called me to do. I want to continue to go further than I ever could on my own. So I want to be known as faithful. I want to be found faithful. A lot of people in our society today, they just want to be found. They're like, man, if people would just find me. I'm here. I've got the singing voice. I'm here. I can preach better than that white guy on the stage. Like, I'm here. I'm here. They just got to find me. I believe when we stop focusing on being found and start focusing on being found faithful, that's when God's actually able to use us the way that he wants to. But as long as we're focused on being found and as long as we're making it about us, God will always be limited in what he can do in and through our lives. The third thing is simply this. God doesn't change his mind about his plan for you. God doesn't change his mind about his plan for you and I. I'm so thankful that God doesn't change his mind. I'm so thankful that his plan is something that I can be obedient in the opportunity of today. His plan is something I don't have to decide, but I can discover. And his plan is something that he doesn't change. That's encouraging because some of you might think, man, how could God ever use me? How could he have a plan for my life? You don't know what I've done. You don't know the areas that I've come up short. You don't know what my past looks like. I just want to encourage you that God's plan for you and his thoughts towards you, they never change. They never change. In fact, in the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 29, it says, for God's gifts and his call, they're irrevocable. One translation says without repentance. It means he gives them, and when he gives giftings and gives calls, he doesn't take them away. So no matter what you've done, no matter how bad you think you've messed up, no matter how bad you think you've been, God hasn't given up on you. He still loves you. He's still for you, and he still has a plan for you. He's just waiting for you to turn towards him and be obedient to what he's told you to do so that he can use you the way he wants to. See, I've found that a lot of times the plan of God simply looks like being led by peace, God shining light on a step. You take the step of faithfulness, God shows up. You take another step, so he illuminates it, God shows up. He doesn't show you the whole staircase, but he'll show you a step. And it doesn't seem significant, but it just literally seems like a step. And it seems small, but it's literally just a step. And a lot of people fail to ever take the step. A lot of people fail to ever do the small thing because they're waiting for their big break. I've seen people cease to move for years because they're waiting for the big break. Can I encourage you? The key to your destiny tomorrow is doing what you know to do today. Don't stand still. Make sure that you're taking a step, because every single day that we wake up and every single day that our feet hit the floor, it is an opportunity for us to step into a step of obedience towards God that points us closer to his destiny. The key to your destiny tomorrow is doing what you know to do today. I've seen too many people stay stagnant when all you need to do is take a step. I've seen too many people wait for something significant and fail to take the small step. Don't let that be you. I believe here at the U, if we're known for anything, I want to be known as the most committed, faithful people at our jobs, at school, wherever you find yourself, whatever you find in your hand today. Would people call you faithful? Would your faithfulness make you stand out? Would your commitment to what you do right now, the opportunity God's given you right now, make you stand out to your boss, to your coworkers? Does it make you stand out? Because I found that it's the key to what's in our future. It's being faithful with what we have today. I'll never forget working in Oklahoma at Cheddar's Casual Cafe. Nothing casual about it. It was crazy. And I was working there, and like I said, I'd never had any experience serving. I was really sheltered, so I didn't even know any of the names of the alcoholic beverages. And so that was rough because everybody ordered alcohol all the time and I didn't know what they meant. So I would have to ask people. It was a rough couple months, but I remember sticking it out. I remember having people tell me as I was working, you're never gonna make it here. I don't know why you even started. This is the busiest restaurant in Tulsa. You need to go down the road to Applebee's, they're dead. You need to start there and work your way up. I remember literally, they told me that. I remember literally every single day at work, somebody told me, I'm just gonna be honest with you because you seem like a nice guy, and I just wanna be honest with you. You shouldn't be here. You don't know what you're doing. You're not good at this. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I know I'm not good at this, but I'm gonna get good at this. And I watched people alongside me quit. And I watched people alongside me that probably were even better than I was at that time, just throw in the towel because it was difficult. And I thought to myself, no matter how difficult it gets, I'm not gonna quit. I'm gonna keep being persistent. I'm gonna be faithful with this opportunity that God's given me. I'm not gonna look. There were other jobs that came up that people were like, hey, we could hire you over here. And it looked like what maybe I would be a little bit better at, but I was like, no, I'm not gonna be the type, because a lot of my friends, they went from one job to another job, to another job, to another job. And it was always the job's fault, you know what I mean? It was always like, that employer, they just didn't get me. And it's like, no, you're just an idiot. And so, excuse my language. But I was like, I'm not gonna be that person. I'm gonna be the type of person that in my life is consistent. It's just does one job while I'm here. I'm not gonna have multiple jobs. I'm gonna do one job and I'm gonna do it well. And so the first few months went by. It didn't get any better. I went on Thanksgiving break, went home, really contemplated leaving school and the job. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to stick with it. God, you called me there. I'm going to stick with it. I don't like it, but I'm going to stick with it. My girlfriend's here, but I'm going to stick with it. I don't want to be there, but I'm going to stick with it. And so I did. I stuck with it. And December rolls around, January, February. Man, by March, all of a sudden, I'm getting the preferred sections. By April, all of a sudden, I'm making the most on the floor. By the time April rolls around, my boss, the manager of the entire store, who was only in on special occasions, was having me serve as golf buddies because he knew that I would take care of them the best that anyone would take care of them. And so he's putting me in the preferred section with the people that he has coming in. By my second year, I got whatever section I wanted whenever I wanted it, and was usually always the leader in making tips on the floor. On my second year, I got moved into the other section that was even crazier, where you don't just have 4 tables anymore, you have 6 to 8 tables, and you're running those during busy nights. I then got asked to be a manager, which I gladly turned down because I actually would rather go in ministry than be a manager at a restaurant. I had learned enough about managing a restaurant that ministry seemed real appealing at that point. But the reason I tell that story is because I was terrible at it. I'm not even kidding you. I was awful. I was the worst. But I believe if you're consistent and you're faithful and you're better yet committed, you can do anything that you put your mind to and that you'll put your heart in. The problem is we're too quick to dismiss opportunities that God could move in us and work things out of us. We're too quick to move on because we fail to commit if the conditions aren't right. I don't want to wait for the conditions to be right to commit. I want to be committed. I want to be faithful. I want to be found faithful in this season so that when God goes to the next season, when he's in the next season waiting on me, seeing if I can handle this, that I am well prepared, that I am well ready, and I can step into the next opportunity because I know this to be true. The opportunity tomorrow is tied to how I'm seizing the opportunity today. The opportunity tomorrow, the step tomorrow is tied to my obedience right now. The opportunity to be faithful tomorrow is tied to this seemingly small opportunity to be faithful today. Are you being faithful with what's in your hand? The job that you don't like, that you wish away. You're just like, man, I wish I could find a new job. No, maybe God wants you to stay there, be a light there, work hard there, so that he can prove some things in you and build some character about you that he's going to use in the next season. I learned more during that season than a lot of seasons of life about serving, about keeping a good attitude, about perseverance, that to this day, I use some of those same character traits that God built in me back then. Some of you have lacked the character traits that you need to get to the next level because you fail to be committed anywhere. I believe that here at the U, we are called to be a generation and a people who are committed to whatever season, to whatever call, to whatever opportunity we have right now. I don't know about you, but man, I just want to be found faithful because I know this, God has a plan. His plan is good. His plan never changes, but part of it is contingent on my commitment.